Cloud Challenge of the Stallions is really very different than the first two Cloud programs. The first program is largely about Cloud growing up from age 2 hours old to 5 years old. And then when we pick it up in Cloud's legacy, Cloud becomes stepfather of the foal named Flint. And the mare is Sitka. Well, Sitka was with Shaman, very powerful dun stallion. In Shaman's band the same year, a little Palomino was born to a black mare named Pocasino. And this is Cloud's son. Here you have Cloud raising Flint, who is Shaman's son, and Shaman raising Boulder, who is Cloud's son. I never imagined what would happen, but we deal with, in Cloud Challenge of the Stallions, these two stepsons, and instead of being kicked out as 2-year-olds, which is typical, both Shaman and Cloud keep these stepsons in their families. By the time these young stallions are 2 and 3 years old, predation really skyrocketed. Mountain lions started hunting the foals very intensely. In 1 year, 2004, no foal survived up here on the mountaintop. One little foal survived down near the front gate of the horse range on the paved road where mountain lions probably didn't frequent because there's too many people. But up here in this isolated wilderness, mountain lions were prowling. And so what we saw, I thought, was a modification of the behavior of the family groups in response to the pressure from mountain lions. The band started functioning as units closer to each other. At the same time that predation is increasing, so are the number of bachelor stallions that are coming of age, and so you have the potential for theft. Both Shaman and Cloud keep their stepsons close with them to help them protect and alert to mountain lions and protect against marauding bachelors. Big mistake, because what happened is these two young stallions also had the opportunity to really bond to the mares of their stepfathers, and then they ended up turning, both of them, on their stepfathers, which was a shocking turn of events. Shakespearean type of story and fascinating to see. The family group is led by the band stallion, who protects the family. But the lead mare, and particularly Sitka, was a very powerful leader. And when they were going to go to water, or there were decisions to be made about weather and where they should go, or maybe they should rest now, Sitka made those decisions, despite Cloud's powerful personality. When he first got her, you could see that he was a bit unwilling to go along with this very, very powerful older mare. And yet, she would just go off. She'd say, okay, now we're leaving. And she'd lead the band. And he'd be standing there like, I don't really want to go. And it really didn't make any difference because she just left anyway. So he had to temper his really volatile, outgoing personality, precocious and busy personality, with this very calm, confident, and powerful lead mare. She steadied him. She was his anchor. And so early on in Cloud Challenge of the Stallions, he loses Sitka. She dies, probably while going away to foal when she's 16 or 17 years old. And Cloud still, to this day, doesn't have a mare that ever took the place of Sitka. I believed that Sitka was dead, didn't look like any of Cloud's other mares were pregnant, and I thought there would be no Cloud foals on the mountain. This was 2006. And I was up here by myself. I was staying at Penn's cabin, and I went back to Penn's cabin at night after finding that Sitka was missing and feeling kind of down about that. There aren't going to be any Cloud foals. Oh man, this is too bad, you know. I had hoped that he would have a foal. But in the morning, for some reason, I woke up, I threw on my clothes, I didn't brush my teeth, I got in the car and I took off. And I went in the direction that I'd seen them the night before. And I crested a hill and I saw a newborn foal. And the mother was just getting up, and it was Velvet. And I started filming. And as the minutes passed, I realized that this dark lump with mucus that looked like covering him, because he was still in his sack and covered with blood and afterbirth, I believed it was a dark foal. But as the morning progressed and he started to dry out, I saw that he was a pale buckskin, like Cloud's grandmother. And I don't know what possessed me to want to get out here pre-dawn when I didn't think anything was going to be happening. So sometimes I think in the course of my filmmaking, I've come to maybe realize that you sense things, if you're in tune with where you are, that are not really on a cognitive or intellectual level. They're on some kind of a visceral, throwing yourself out of the door of Penn's cabin and getting in the car and not even realizing why. And I think that all along in doing these films, there has been an element of that I was very, very late in realizing that there was a certain path that perhaps I was chosen to take, and if I was open and calm and centered about it, that was where I went. I have found things in the range. I've found Cloud before just by simply having a hunch or just getting my feet walking, and I would happen in the right direction. You may remember that I adopted a horse in the first Cloud film and trained him, and then at the end of the film I bring him back to where he came from because I promised him I would do that, and he nearly dumped me in the water hole on a cold day when we were filming. Whoa, come on. Let's go. But in Cloud Challenge of the Stallions, Trace becomes not only a good friend to me and a good saddle horse, but a good tool because the weather was so intense and there was so much snow, we could not drive into the horse range. The only thing we could do was to ride. And so Trace and I set off on a 5-day trek to try to find Cloud. We had had a late-born foal in Cloud Challenge of the Stallions. Cloud's young mare, who had never foaled because she'd been given infertility drugs when she was young, had never had a baby. And when she had her first baby, she had it going into winter. And so Little Shadow becomes a character in the show. And in trying to find out if Shadow has survived, Trace and I set off through the snow, going to the places where Cloud usually hung out in the winter. In Cloud Challenge of the Stallions, we employed the Cineflex. And what we were able to do is fly over the horse range at such a high elevation that it wouldn't scare the horses, and then be able to see the terrain in the wintertime, and the camera could follow me. As it turned out, we didn't really use much of that for me riding. But it's remarkable that, Trace wasn't even afraid because the helicopter was so far away, and yet with the Cineflex you can zoom in all the way in, and I'm pretty much full frame riding him. And it really looks like I'm trying to find a needle in a haystack, and it turns out that I was unable to find Cloud. But the Cineflex allowed us to really capture the scope of this place. Weather, that's always a character in the Cloud films, becomes an even bigger character. The weather became really almost impossible and unbearable from a filmmaker's standpoint, but of course from a dramatic standpoint it's a big part of the story. When Cloud's little daughter is born, it was the most miserable weather I can remember enduring up here at the end of May. It's a combination of snow, rain, sleet, and wind, and we named that little filly Rain. What I've tried to do in my films is show that the horses are part of a tapestry of life. Wild horses don't live in a vacuum. They're part of the ecosystem, and they really fit into that. And they live with mule deer and bighorn sheep and black bears and coyotes and marmots and golden eagles and bluebirds. And that's what makes it such a wondrous place. So this is not just a story about wild horses, but of course they're the stars of the show. It is the story of fathers and sons. And it is the story of the relationship of these fathers and sons. And it is the strong desire to have a family. And that is the driving force of wild horses. The things they value and love more than anything else are their freedom and their families. And both of those I think we've handled pretty well in Cloud, Challenge of the Stallions.